Hi, I'm Allie Hamilton, and I'm so happy to welcome you to the Come As You Are podcast. Every week, we'll be talking about some aspect of healing, usually around childhood wounds and complicated familial relationships. The topics will always coincide with my personal essay of the week, and this will be a place where we can take a deep dive together. I'm so thrilled you've joined me and delighted for you to always come as you are. Hi there. Welcome to our talk today. The topic is tip me over and pour me out. And you're welcome, because you'll probably have that song in your head for the whole day. But it's really this idea that it's a Zen Buddhism parable, which I'll share with you, about a young man who is seeking enlightenment, and he's traveling the world trying to study with the foremost teachers, people who have all the answers. And he keeps hearing about this one Zen master who lives, on a mountain, very remote, in a cave. And this is the person who apparently really has all the answers to, life's biggest questions and has achieved enlightenment. And he decides this is the person that he has to study with. And so he goes on a quest, and he spends months trekking up all the wrong mountains trying to find her. And eventually he has success. He comes upon the Zen master. She's this old, shriveled woman with twinkling eyes and, quick to laugh. And she invites him in for tea, and they sit down, and he instantly is telling her about all the people that he's studied with and all the places he's been and all the lessons he's learned and his own philosophy about life and everything he's gleaned from the experience that he's had, and how persistent he had to be in order to find her on this mountain. And he's talking relentlessly for a very long time. And eventually she gets up and she goes and she gets the kettle, and she comes back and she refills her teacup, and then she refills his. But she continues, even once his cup is full, she allows the water to spill over the sides of the cup and onto the table. And the young man jumps up and moves back so he doesn't get burned by the boiling water. And he says, what are you doing? The cup is full. And she throws her head back and laughs and says, exactly, the cup is full. I can't teach you anything this way. You have to come and talk to me when your cup is empty. And you may relate. You may have had experiences like this in your own life. If you've been on the dating apps, you probably have had experiences like this, where you go to meet someone and they don't stop talking, don't ask you a single question. I actually had, an experience that's springing to mind. I went and met a very nice person, but he did not take a breath for an hour and did not ask me a single question about myself. And then eventually I said, I have to go. And he said, oh, wait, where are you from? And I said, you've been talking for an hour. Like, that was a question that, you needed to ask me a really long time ago, or at least any question, some question. So I have to go now. And, so that maybe you've had your own experiences like that. In the essay, I was writing about another experience I had years ago when my local studio was open in Santa Monica. I've moved fully online since then, but at the time I had a studio for 10 years on 2nd Street in Santa Monica. And this woman came to class, and it was right before class was starting. There were already people in the room, and they had their mats out, and they were sitting on their mats and, quietly chatting amongst each other as people do before class. And there were people still checking in at the front desk. And this woman came right up to the front of the room, and she said, hi, I can't remember her name, but in the essay I said that her name was Flavia. Hi, I'm Flavia. You must be Allie. And she was speaking in a very loud volume so that everyone in the room suddenly was quiet and paying attention to this exchange. And she said, I've been hearing about you for a long time. And she mentioned a few teachers in town here in Los Angeles who had recommended my class to her, which of course, it always feels great when other teachers are, recommending you. And that's always a nice feeling. But she had this, there was an edge to her, and she came into the room with a lot of energy. And she said, so anyway, I've come to see for myself and take your class. And she started telling me about other teachers she didn't like loudly, which of course, and some of them were teachers I know very well and respect a lot. And so I met her at that same volume because I felt the need to, interject and just say, it's such a subjective thing, what resonates with one person isn't going to resonate with another, and doesn't mean it's not a good teacher. It just means it's not the right teacher for you at this time. But she kind of plowed right over me and said, anyway, I'm here now and I've heard a lot of good things about you from people I trust, so we'll see. And she turned and went and put her mat down. And I knew it was not going to go well. I absolutely knew it just wasn't, because it was already set up. She came in with so much, her cup was full, right? Her cup was full, and she was there to decide whether she was going to put me on her liked list or her not liked list. And she kind of put me on notice, right, in front of the room before class started. And I had been teaching long enough at that time. I had my own studio. It didn't trouble me in that way that it probably would have if I'd been a younger teacher, if I had only been teaching a few years. I'm sure it would have messed with my head. But at this time, I don't even know how many years I had been teaching. I was sort of just amused, and also sad for her, because I just knew she's too full. She can't just let herself have this experience and then see how she feels later. So sure enough, halfway through class, she very loudly rolled up her mat and left, didn't look at me, nothing. So I knew, and was sort of chuckling, that I had made her not liked list. And there were some students in the room. They're always kind-hearted people, sensitive, beautiful people. And there were a few of them who looked at me with concern, but it just wasn't, I just kind of shrugged, because there's nothing you can do when someone walks into an experience that way. It's really just a reflection of their inner state, and it has nothing to do with you. And so I didn't take it personally. There's nothing, I just wished her well. And when I was a younger teacher, when I say younger, I don't even mean my age. I mean just when I hadn't been teaching as long. Of course those things mess with your head. You're a human being. If somebody rolls up their mat and walks out of your class and you've only been teaching a year or two, you're like, ugh, did I say something? Did I do something? What happened? And you are essentially leaving the class with the person who's just left, right? You're mentally with them instead of with the people who've stayed in the room, and you're second guessing yourself, or you're whatever it is, And I learned over time that, first of all, you never know what is happening. It could be anything at all. It could be they suddenly are worried they left their oven on, or they suddenly their stomach is upset, or it could be they can't stand the sound of your voice, or something you said did they found it triggering. It can be anything. It's a confrontational. When you're practicing yoga, especially if you're practicing with someone who's trying to impart the why of the whole thing, it can be really confrontational. So it's not personal. Sometimes it's just it's not a good fit, or what you're teaching just isn't it isn't for them in that moment, and it's completely fine. So for me, it's always wish people well on their way out the door and hope that they find what they need. But in that case with her, I knew before we even started, like I knew it wasn't going to go well. And that's the idea of the full cup, right? When you're walking into a situation and you're so full of your own ideas or your own concerns or your own agenda or your own ideas of, what the situation is going to be like, that you can't be curious anymore, and you can't just be open and allow yourself to have an experience. And just a very, simple example of that is if you experience social anxiety, and you walk into a party with a lot of fear of like, this is gonna be awful. I never know what to say in these situations. I always feel like super awkward. I don't really want to be here. I don't want to do, like, if you walk in with all of that, your cup is full. And I know it's really hard. Believe me, I think it's surprising for people because I've learned to be either like an extroverted introvert or I'm an introverted extrovert, whatever it is, going into a party where I don't know anyone, like that's not my favorite thing in the world to do. But being in a class where I've just like taught a yoga class and talking to people after, I can do that all day long and be really social. I've learned over time how to manage that, like anxiety. I do think I tend to be a quieter person than people might think. But I've learned how to be social. And really the best and fastest way to do it is just to ask questions. People really love to talk about themselves, and they like to, have someone who's really actively listening. And I don't mean that as like a, if you're listening to someone, then you're present. Right? You're present, you're engaged, you're paying attention, you're curious. You don't have to make a whole thing about it. Like, oh, I'm going to do some active listening now. No, just listen. Just actually care, right? Be interested, and it'll all flow. And so I've learned over time that if I am experiencing anxiety, all I have to do is just listen and ask some questions and really pay attention and, be curious. And if I'm engaging with someone who, is just talking at me, that isn't enjoyable, then, you get yourself out of that situation and move on. And that's like life, right? But so much of the time people are, with the woman who came to my class, she made it really clear right away what all the inner workings were, what all the thoughts were in her head, like the energy that she telegraphed it, she put it right in my lap. And so I knew, but a lot of the time when you are, let's say in a relationship with someone, in a friendship with someone, it takes a long time usually to get to know people and to get to know what their stories are, or what their struggles are, what their triggers are, what their quirks are. Like it takes a long time and a lot of different situations to really know someone intimately, where you can kind of guess like, oh, this is probably going to be a tough, experience for this person, or this might be something that they're going to struggle with, because you've seen them in 15 different scenarios that are similar. It takes years to really know people like extremely well. That doesn't mean that you can't genuinely connect with someone quickly, because of course you can, and you can find that chemistry with someone, whether we're talking about like a romantic relationship or a friendship, that intellectual chemistry, that energetic chemistry where it's just like so much fun to have a conversation and to talk about things. That can happen really fast. But to really know what somebody's inner, like the things they struggle with, that usually takes time. And so I was talking about all the different scenarios where that can come into play, and in relationships even. And there's that Maya Angelou quote, which I also shared in the essay, when people show you who they are, believe them the first time. And that's that's a little bit like counter to what I'm saying, right? Because I'm talking about like it takes a really long time to get to know people. But then there are also times where someone makes it really easy really early. You don't have to wait years to figure it out. And sometimes we don't want to get that memo. So both of those things can be true, right? Like if things are going really well with someone where you're not getting any kind of red flag, or it's just like, I really connect with this person, this is beautiful. In those scenarios, it might take a long time for you to see where the kind of cracks are, And when I say cracks, that's not a bad thing. I'm talking about like, Leonard Cohen, right? Like, that's how the light gets in, right? Where you start to really know someone's vulnerabilities. That might take quite a while, but there are other people that let you know really early, like super early, that there are some things going on that might not be so easy to deal with for you. And I think most of us can look in the rearview mirror and locate relationships where we did know early that something was off, or that, there might be some issues here, and we just kind of marched straight through anyway. And so I was talking about that in the context of, and I kind of, sometimes when I'm writing, I will create an amalgamation. I'll kind of, I'll be talking about not just one person, but like, few relationships as one person. And honestly, I can look back at a lot of relationships in my 20s, and I've always been a serial monogamist. It's just my style. And so I can look back at a few of those relationships from that era when I was really trying to heal, and really trying to figure myself out. And it's not to say that I'm done now or anything. It's just, it's a lot easier now. I'm 53, and like I know myself pretty well, and I'm pretty familiar with my stuff. And but in my like 20s and 30s, I was still trying to figure out like what's driving me, or what is going wrong here, that I keep picking people who hurt me or let me down or don't have my back, or like they're really kind one minute and then they're really not kind, like what's going on? And there is one person in particular that I was thinking about with the red flag situation, because he just happens to be a person where there were a lot of red flags that I kept excusing or talking myself out of, or even talking with him about, and I would think like, okay, we've made progress. We would have these conversations where he would mirror. I think he had learned about mirroring at some point. And so I would say, hey, this thing that happened, can we talk about it? Like it really hurt my feelings, or it was really confusing. And he would say back to me, okay, like I understand, I hear that, that thing that I did was really like confusing for you, and it didn't make you feel good. So he would do that. And so I would feel really heard, like, okay, he totally got it. And then like 2 weeks later, he'd do the exact same thing again. So I'm like, well, that clearly didn't go in because I thought it did, and it seemed like it did, but it, the behavior doesn't change. And that's the best like apology you could ever give anyone, is changed behavior, right? Like if you really want someone to feel heard and understood and respected and cared for, and they've expressed to you, this thing that happened or this thing that keeps happening is really tough for me, you're going to know that you got through because you're going to see a change in behavior. And we're not all, it's not to say that because someone is troubled by something that they're correct. Like it's not, sometimes someone has triggers that might not make any sense to you at all, and the ask might be too great. Like if someone's asking you to be less social or less, I have a friend who popped into my mind here while I'm talking to you, and she's amazing. Like she can talk to anyone anywhere. She could just can walk into a store and end up having like the most in-depth conversation. She's just great at that. She's great at drawing people out, and she is very curious. And so, if someone were to say to her, like, I'd like for you to do less of that, that's intrinsic to who she is. And I would hope she would say, like, I cannot start major conversations if you and I are having quality time together, but like, I can't change this essential thing about my nature. And I wouldn't. Like, I would hope she would, and I think she would. If someone's asking you to change something about the thing that makes you you, I would really hope that that's like just an easy no, because we need that, right? We need people out there just like being fully themselves, especially when we're talking about loving, kind-hearted, empathetic, curious people. Like, we need more of that in the world. And in the case that I'm describing, that is my friend. She is very much, she embodies all of those qualities. So if anyone is ever asking you to kind of like dim your light, make yourself smaller. And I've been in those relationships with people, and it is so painful to feel like, you're bending over backwards, or you're shrinking yourself, or you're almost like, am I breathing too loudly? I went out with someone once who said I was breathing too loudly. And like the way I, don't eat apples around me because the crunching noise is... It's like, yeah, this is probably not good. Like, that's probably not a good sign. You shouldn't have to like tiptoe around and make yourself small and feel, like your existence in and of itself is taking up too much space. That's not a good sign if that's what you're feeling in a relationship. And so this person that I was talking about in the essay, there were a lot of red flags. And I was in my 20s, and I just kept talking myself out of it and saying like, but there are so many great qualities here, like really great qualities. And there were, I'll just communicate around this, and like, eventually it'll be okay. And if I can just like love him enough, then he won't need to keep acting out in these ways. There's a lot of acting out and a lot of like need for approval. And there was a lot of stuff going on there that I could see clearly, and it was troubling me, and I was speaking up, but I wasn't getting the message that like his cup was full, like he had a whole bunch of things. He liked being that person who was like, like pushing the envelope, walking the line, taking risks, doing the unconventional thing. Like, that was part of his identity. He was really wrapped up in that. And so it didn't really matter what the impact was. And if it had just been his like true nature, then me asking him to do less of that wouldn't have been okay. But there were really like troubling, concerning, self-sabotaging, self-destructive things going on that were very clear and scary. I was like worried. I was worried for him. I was worried for myself sometimes. And I just didn't have enough confidence in my own feelings at the time to say this is too much, until a particular afternoon where, it became really clear to me, like, okay, this is beyond. There have been lies here. There have been, betrayals. There have been like major things going on here that I did not know. And now I'm out. Like, that's too far for me. And when I looked back on it later, I just realized how much I was denying my own experience in order to stay in it, and excusing really painful behavior, or explaining it away in my own mind, or having 20 conversations with people in my life about, is it me? Or when I knew it was not me. I knew things were not okay with this person. Like, I knew on a gut level, and I just kept overriding that. And generally speaking, when you are, I'm not even going to say generally speaking, just forget that. When you are overriding your intuition on a regular basis, you're heading for like a really painful experience. If you know in your gut, in your heart, in your mind, like, this is not okay and this does not feel right, you got to trust that. And it might just be like it's not right for you, or it might be it wouldn't be right for anyone. There are certain things in life where you're like, yeah, that probably wouldn't be okay for anyone, but it's definitely not okay for me. And those are boundaries, right? And you are allowed to have those. And they might not, my boundaries and your boundaries do not have to be the same. We don't have to agree. It doesn't have to make sense. It's like you just need what you need in order to feel at ease in a relationship, in a friendship, whatever it is. And I need what I need. Now, if you find that the things that you need are too much for, many, many people, then you might want to look at it. Like if what you need to feel comfortable is to be able to go through my phone, no, we're not doing that. Because that's a violation of my privacy, and it's a lack of trust on your part. And that is coming from whatever's happened to you, whatever betrayals you've been through. That's where your cup is full. And that's your job, right? To figure that out, empty the cup and try to figure out, okay, what's serving me, what's not serving me, what healing needs to happen for me to not punish other people for, experiences from my past that had nothing to do with them. So there are lines and things that you're figuring out, and it's always a case-by-case situation, but we all come into every situation in life with our frame of reference, with all of the things that we've been through that have shaped how we feel or what we think about relationships or situations or other people or ourselves, what our roles are, what a relationship is supposed to feel like. And in the comments under the essay, there were people, and it always happens. I grew up in an alcoholic household at my mom's, and with a lot of secret keeping and lies and cheating and all kinds of drama at my dad's, and painful stuff. And so when you grow up in any kind of scenario like that, where there's either secret keeping or there's a lot of uncertainty or you don't know if you're safe or not, you may find when you go out into the world, that feels like home to you. And so you are, drawn toward that kind of dynamic where you don't feel safe. You're not sure from day to day what's going to happen. You are constantly second guessing your experience. If you grew up with a lot of gaslighting, that's going to feel normal to you. And at a certain point, you're going to want to go and empty that cup, and probably do it in a therapeutic process with someone who's really exceptionally good and can just help you figure out those are valid feelings, that was not okay. And that is not how a healthy relationship works. You might have to kind of unlearn and relearn what a relationship is. And that's part of emptying the cup so that you can go into a situation with curiosity, with openness, with trust, and see, give yourself over to the experience and see what happens. And I'm not just talking about romantic relationships. I'm talking about friendships, to be able to go in with an open heart and with an open mind and, to really connect and be vulnerable. And there's no intimacy without vulnerability. Those things are intertwined. And so if you want people to really know you and see you and understand you, you have to be willing to let them in and share the things that are maybe not so pretty or not so, not that you would things you wouldn't necessarily post on your social media. You gotta, at a certain point, be willing to just be very raw. And for me, that is really the best stuff in life, right? Is genuine connection with someone where I'm safe with this person. They know me, they've seen me at my best, they've seen me at my worst. I've shared the darkest moments with them, and they're still here and they still love me, that, okay, this person genuinely love me because I'm not holding back and I'm not sending my ambassador in and I'm not making it all shiny and pretty. I'm just being really open about who I am and what I struggle with. And they're still yeah, I love you. You're great. That's the good stuff, right? And to be able to give that back to people too, and by the way, I don't know. We're so much more alike than we are dissimilar, and the things that you might feel, just devastating shame around, are probably the same things everyone else is. It's like I've just found time and again that when I share what feels to me like the deepest, darkest stuff, the people that I feel comfortable enough to share it with, and I share a lot of stuff with y'all, like I write and I talk about these things. So more and more, I just feel like we're all in it together. People are generally speaking like, oh yeah, me too. Like I've been through that. I know what that is. And the more you talk about it, the less alone people feel. And so I don't want to have anyone in my inner circle that I can't be really open with. And sometimes in a friendship, you're going along with someone, any relationship, and it's great. Like it's just clicking, and you're able to talk about like the important things, and you laugh and you cry together, like you do all this stuff, and you start to have all these experiences together, and you think to yourself, like, I'll never not know this person. And then you have your first big conflict, whatever it is, which is going to happen eventually in any intimate relationship. You can count on it. Like if it's a long-term thing, eventually something's going to happen, where there's somebody's feelings get hurt, or somebody feels misunderstood, or somebody feels taken for granted, whatever it is. And that is when you have an opportunity to either go deeper or not. And that's also when you really see somebody's stuff. Like when you're in an intimate, vulnerable relationship with someone and there's a conflict, and now that person feels whatever it is they're feeling. Usually people feel betrayed, right? Like the fight or flight takes over, and fight, flight, freeze, fawn, someone is at a very high, like the nervous system activation going on. That's when you're going to see how this person operates when they're in that state. Do they go for your jugular? Do they start talking about things that happened 3 years ago that you didn't even realize they were holding on to because they didn't say anything to you at the time? Like, are they going to start throwing in your face, conversations that you had with them when you were hurting, and the time and energy they spent trying to help you? Like, what's going to happen now? And that's where it gets really interesting, where you're like, oh, wow, I had not seen this side before. And that's where you kind of get to figure out, are we getting through this, and are we going to be stronger for it? Or is this the beginning of the end? And, for me, I've had situations in my life where when you get to that first kind of giant, pothole, like probably that's where you're seeing, oh, this person really struggles with this stuff. Like they can't have the conversation. They're going to like just put the gate down, and for me, that really does not work. Like I expect conflict in any long-term close relationship. It's going to happen. It's like it's a no-brainer. It's going to happen. And I am someone like, I want to talk it out. I want to sit down. It doesn't have to be in the heat of the moment, but I definitely don't want to let a lot of time go by. And I want to sit down face to face, eye to eye, and like soul to soul, and have those conversations and, say whatever needs to be said and really work through it as a team, as someone. I love you. I care about you. I'm invested in this relationship, and like I'm here, and if there's something that I have done to let someone down, I want to have the opportunity to own that and to, really examine like what happened that made me show up in a way that would have let somebody down, and to apologize without qualifications, like a genuine, I am so sorry. Like I get it. I understand why you feel this way. And like, I'm going to really think about what happened and make sure that I show up differently next time. And then I'm going to do it. That's that change behavior thing. Or it could be, wow, like that is really interesting because for me, that's like not a trigger of any kind. And I didn't realize this was, really a painful, like a raw nerve for you. And now I know that, and I'll be very careful. So like, I'm not willing to walk on eggshells for anyone because I grew up like that. I grew up walking on eggshells. That's what it is to grow up in an alcoholic household, and to grow up with two parents who have like flash rage. Like that's, I cannot do that. I can't do, like yelling really is not, for me, that's like, I don't want to be around that. And any kind of physical violence, like, that just shuts me right down. And so those are deal breakers for me. If somebody's conflict resolution involves like screaming and yelling and going for your jugular and, throwing things or like throwing punch, like that's not going to work for me. I'm not signing up for that. But if someone needs to like walk out the door and let off some steam, of course, that's fine. If people are managing their big feelings in a responsible way, and I don't expect perfection, sometimes people say things in the heat of the moment that they regret later. Got to be willing to forgive people, just like hopefully people are going to forgive you, because you're not going to get everything right every minute, and you're not going to be operating from your like highest self in every experience all the time for all of life. Like it's not going to happen. But I'm talking about as a regular way of being. If somebody is, going for your jugular, like that's just not okay. And I grew up with a lot of that too, with like things being, for me, if I am showing up for you, there's no price tag. Like I'm not going to throw that in your face later, ever. I really dislike that. That's a big, for me, that's like not cool, if we're in a long-term relationship, there are going to be times where you're really hurting and it is fully your turn. You've lost someone, whatever it is, you're grieving, you're going through a huge life transition. It's your turn. I am there for you. We are going to talk, and I'm going to be there, and I'm going to bring you groceries or whatever else, whatever else you need. Like it's your turn. And there's no clock ticking. I'm not going to come back to you in 3 years and be like, I spent hours listening to, like, that's never happening. And I would hope, like, for me, when people like that, no, thank you. I don't want to engage with people who are keeping lists in their heads, or, tell me in the moment, or not too long after. If something's bothering you, tell me soon so I can like course correct if I need to, but don't tell me 3 years from now. Like that's just, and that's part of being accountable, right? Is being able to communicate fairly quickly if something is not okay for you. That's a way of treating the relationship with respect and treating the other party with respect, like giving them the respect of knowing they can handle a hard conversation. If they show you that they can't, well, now you have that information. And so I have had times in my life where someone's showing me in those moments of conflict, I can't do it. Like, I'm not up for this. I'm going to just stop communicating. And that, there have been times where I have kind of said, okay, well, I'm going to deal with that because there's so many great things in this relationship. But that's a giant red flag. If that happens every time there's a conflict, that's not a good sign. And eventually it's going to explode, and, I sort of put that in the same category as ghosting, right? If somebody can't communicate or won't communicate or won't, like, I'm not talking about you go out with someone on a date and then they won't stop, like, emailing you, calling you, texting you, then yeah, like if you've said, hey, listen, I think you're a wonderful person, I wasn't feeling it, and they don't stop, then you got to block that number. Absolutely. If someone is harassing you in any way, shape, or form, that's a block. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when you have an established relationship with someone and they just exit your life and they won't like have a conversation. That to me is like not, it's just not It's not how we do. But there are a lot of people who do. It's just not how I do, and it's not how I want to engage. That's just not, that's not going to work for me for the long haul. We're not going to know each other when we're 90 if this is how it's going to be, right? And you're allowed to have those. You're allowed to have those boundaries. And to just say, this person, the way that their cup is full isn't going to work for me. I wish them well. You don't have to make people the villain in the story. It's just not going to work for you. And that's okay. And it's sad, but it's okay. And I think that is another sign of, whatever you want to call it, spiritual maturity or emotional maturity, or however you want to think about it, and accountability, just being able to not have to make not have to make yourself the hero or the victim of every story in your life, and also not having to make other people the villain, but just to be able to say, the way your cup and my cup are full or empty, it's not going to work. And that's sad, but it's where we are. So I don't expect anyone to have a completely empty cup, but the emptier your cup can be, especially when it comes to, if you find that the stories that you're telling yourself, or your ways of being, if your lack of trust, for example, is making it really hard for you to connect with people, that's a good thing to work on. And that, to me, is what I mean when I say walking in with an empty cup. It's not that it's completely squeaky clean empty. It's that you've done all this work to really understand, I'm bringing a lot of stuff into every situation I enter. Any ways that I've been hurt or disappointed or heartbroken, any fears I have, any trust, any of that stuff, I'm going to do a lot of work on that so that I can walk into the situation with as much openness and curiosity as possible, because I know that's the way people can then show me who they are, right? Instead of me having stories about whatever it is. And the woman who came to my class, she had so many stories that I don't even think she got to take my class, really. I think she was just full of, do I like this? Do I not like this? Do I like this? Do I not like this? And imagine going into a first date like that. Do I like this? How's the person supposed to just relax and be themselves if there's this energy of being judged, every time you say something? So for whatever, take that as you will, but my goal, and I think certainly a big part of the yoga practice, but part of any practice, any healing endeavor worth its salt, is going to involve a good amount of examination into what are my stories about things? What are my stories about myself? What are my stories about other people? What are my stories about relationships as a whole? For a long time, in my, young adult life, I thought everyone leaves, everyone cheats. Those were my stories. And guess what? I was attracted to people who left, people who cheated, people who lied, people who were inconsistent. I didn't know from day to day how it was going to be. Your stories are going to have an impact on, it's almost like the scientists that have the bias going in, it's going to affect the results of the experiment. If you're walking in and you think that, it's going to have an impact on the experience that you have. So the more you're able to just be aware and kind of as best you can wipe the slate clean, it's part of discernment in the yoga practice, being able to see clearly, being able to know yourself and understand what is stopping you and what is driving you, and what is getting in your way of feeling at ease in this world. Those are really good things to look at. And that's what I mean by emptying your cup. And two people walking into a relationship or situation, friendship, whatever it is, with that openness, it's going to, that's your best shot at genuine connection and intimacy. And to me, that really is the best stuff in life. I mean, when you get to the end of your life, it is never, you don't ever see on someone's tombstone the bank account, that they left behind, or their weight, or, the size of their house, or the speed of their car, or like how much hair they had on their head. Like, that's not what's on. It's beloved, whatever it is, mother, son, father, daughter, sister, brother, like, it's the people. It's the people. And so anything that is getting in the way of having genuine connection to me, that's a place where you want to really try to like empty the cup, like tip me over, pour me out. Let me try to figure out what's here. And you keep the good stuff, keep the stuff that's like, oh, this is serving me, and see how much of the other stuff you can work through and let it flow, because whatever happened behind you, it doesn't have to have a huge impact on what's happening for you right now or what happens for you in the future. It's like the water just keeps flowing. Let it flow, let it go, see what you can do, the healing work that you need to do so that you can be free of certainly things that other people have done that had nothing to do with you. You don't want to carry that stuff forward for the rest of time. That's not really what we're looking for. I hope that this has been like a helpful conversation and just some good, food for thought about like maybe what you're carrying around with you and how empty or full the cup may be. And I know it's kind of a flipped script on the half empty, half full conversation, because people generally, if someone is saying their cup is half full, they're an optimistic person. And if they're half empty, then they're like a pessimist. And that's not this. This is a whole different thing. This is the Zen Buddhist conversation that we're having, but it's good stuff, and I'm definitely a fan of the empty cup as much as possible in life. And I hope that was helpful, and I look forward to connecting with you again next time. Stay well.